The first work I'm going to show today is called the Weird Faces Vending Machine that I did a couple of years ago. And the Weird Faces Vending Machine is an installation that generates an infinite amount of weird faces that look like my hand-drawn faces. And the installation consisted of an LCD screen, which you see on the top left, a credit card swipe, which you see next to it, and the paper slot that actually dispenses the final prints. And the whole installation should, like, the idea was that it kind of resembles a simplified face. And then the final prints would look something like this. So basically, let's actually look at a video. I think that explains it better than me talking.
Validating payment. Credit card accepted. Generating the faces now. The print job has been started. Manius, do not look at me like that. I like the way you wait. So Manius, you like weird faces? Thank you. Have fun with your weird faces.
So basically, the sound was actually, the machine would actually talk to you, so it would use the information from the credit card, like your name, I guess mainly your name, to talk to you and to write like the dedicated note on the back of each print. So in a way, a lot of the exchange mechanics were like I guess somewhat of a comment on how value is commonly generated in the gallery space, because it kind of really doesn't work with a lot of the work I'm doing, because usually, in fine art, value is generated through scarcity and exclusivity. But if you can generate like a bunch of these prints in like a very short time, that kind of undermines the core principles of that. So even though it wasn't the main aspect about that work, it's in there. And yeah, I think that's enough about that. So in general, due to its procedural, generic, and open nature, software encourages surprise more than other media. This is just like the first image, I think, that came at the time on like Google image search when I looked up surprise. And it allows me to think of a composition as a set of rules rather than a fixed entity, which connects back to the instruction-based I mentioned earlier. One major difference I see personally to the use of randomness and chance in the that was mainly common in the pioneers that used randomness and chance in fine art. The main reason, or oftentimes the reason, people used randomness in the last century was that they wanted to find some sort of objectivity or notion of purity, or detach personal bias from a work. or something like that. I feel like Fluxus is maybe a little bit of an exception in that regard, but if you think about John Cage or other people like that, that certainly was like usually the train of thought. So I feel almost like the opposite about it. So when I work with like randomness and chance, to me it's more like a dialogue on eye level where chance amplifies my personal bias and includes rather than excludes myself from the work. Yeah. The next work I'm going to show is called I Follow. Not even sure if this is art. This was like a series of gifts, but I really like him. I Follow is an ongoing series of computer-generated flipbooks that I gave to people that I want to keep in touch with. And each book shows a creature that's chasing a balloon through a landscape, calling for it. And the only thing I handpicked for every person was like the noise, which you can see on the covers here. Those are the flipbook covers, and the color of the balloon. And the actual type is also hand drawn by me. So those were kind of like the elements I did by hand. But everything else was computer generated. And I think what was can't see my mouse. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I think what was important to me was to kind of like to amplify, even though the books were computer generated, to amplify the human gesture that was behind this gift by transferring it back to an actual physical flipbook. And the actual books look something like, I mean, these are individual pages, but you get the idea. So even though they all have like the same narrative, they're all very different too. And I'm going to show another video for that. Yeah, the people I gave the flipbooks to really appreciated them, and I think I kind of left the end open-ended whether the creature, gets the balloon or not, because that's kind of like how friendship works.